Good morning. I'd like to call this regular session of the Lane County Board of Commissioners to order for Tuesday, October 2nd, 2018. And I'd like to note that Commissioner Farr is going to be coming into the meeting around 10 o'clock today. He's excused to make a presentation to another organization. And with that, I'm going to note several adjustments to the agenda today. Because of that, to try and work items so that maybe Commissioner Farr can get here in time for them, we're going to be moving item 7A back behind item 8B, and item Commissioner's business is going to move ahead of 8B. We're going to interrupt county administration for Commissioner's business. So that'll push both the strategic plan update and the forest work camp issues to the end of our agenda. Are there any other adjustments to the agenda today? Seeing none, then we'll move on to item 2, which is public comment. And I don't believe we have anyone here for public comment, which brings us to Commissioner's response to public comment and or other issues and remonstrance.
I have a couple pieces.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of items in this morning and yesterday's Register Guard. One is congratulations, Lane County. We can breathe easier. Nice little spot there for our anti-smoking campaign. And secondly, this morning's paper, the headline is Death Toll from Flu in U.S. last year, highest in decades. And it says that 80,000 Americans died of the flu in the winter of 2017 and 18. 90% of those deaths were in people 65 and older. So in short, everybody get their flu shot. Thank you.
Any other remonstrance? I'd just like to remind the public that at 11:18 tomorrow morning, there is going to be a test of the emergency alert system, including the iPause system, which is the system that goes out to cell phones. And every cell phone in the nation will be going off at that time, 11:18 Pacific time, if your carrier is part of that system. So a lot of people may not know whether their carrier is a participant or not in the emergency alert system, but there's a good chance your phone is going to buzz or make a horrible sound, like that emergency alert test sound at 11:18 tomorrow morning. So if you don't want to make that sound in a meeting, make sure you silence your phones tomorrow morning, and particularly be aware if you're out driving not to stop and look at your phone because it makes that weird sound. Pay attention to what you're doing on the road. We don't want to have a whole bunch of accidents at 11:19 tomorrow morning. So please, there is an emergency test of the electronic emergency alert system at 11:18 tomorrow morning Pacific time. Be aware, and don't be one of those folks that decides to reach for their phone in their purse on the other side, passenger floor or something like that, and either get one of those huge distracted driving tickets under Oregon's new distracted driving law, or get in an accident, which is even worse. So just be aware, emergency alert system test, 11:18 tomorrow morning. So I noticed somebody walk in a little bit late. Mike, did you want to give public comment? We already got past that, but if that's why you showed up. So with the indulgence of the board, I'm going to jump back to item 2, public comment. And Mike, if you'd like to step up and state your name for the record.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate the chance, even though I was a few minutes late. So my name is Mike McFadden. I'm a citizen of Eugene. And I came in this morning kind of motivated by the fact that it's roughly the 5-year anniversary of the whole event surrounding the emergency closure of the Wayne Morse Terrace outside of the building here. And, you all know me fairly well at this point and kind of know a bit about my story. Some of you maybe don't know me a bit well, but you can check in with your colleagues and they can fill you in. But, I follow the news a lot. I care a lot about local issues across the whole county and in the region. And, you know, I truly do believe that addiction, substance abuse disorders, housing, poverty are huge issues in the county and in the region and in the country, and they're reaching levels that are pretty much emergencies. You know, and I've lived downtown or worked downtown for nearly a dozen years now, and have seen, you know, the progression of the issues of the human condition that people face who live out on the street. And, you know, I think for one, we all know that the areas affected go far beyond the downtown core of Eugene. And, you know, I've seen all over the county, really, people living in conditions that far exceed the level of emergency that, in the case with me where I was arrested for trespassing on the square after you all had voted it to be closed in kind of an ideological opposition to you voting that way. You know, the levels of emergency that were cited in that instance to close the plaza after a protest had been going on for about a week or two, depending on who you ask, you know, far exceed that. And no emergency has been declared by the county or by the city. As far as I know, the county, as the Board of Health, hasn't urged the city to take any kind of emergency actions. And I mean, you all knowing me probably know I probably wouldn't agree with some of the emergency actions that would be proposed to be taken. But I think that we can all agree that the public health emergency has reached a critical level. To my mind, people who struggle with opiate and substance abuse disorders can come from all walks of life, regardless of whom they are, what their background is. And in my mind, those people are incredibly vulnerable, as we've seen in the past week, where adulterated supply chain comes into the region, people are overdosing, potentially dying. So it's really, we're doing great things. I think that we've made a lot of progress since 5 years ago. I really appreciate Steve for all of his hard work and leadership, and know that he has not done it alone. So I know there's a lot of people doing a lot of great work. We have so much more work to do, and the problem may even outstrip our ability to do the work. But I really wanted to remind us all about that incident 5 years ago, because I think that it's a perfect example of the wrong way to deal with a problem. And I really think that in hindsight, the hypocrisy of that decision has been made more and more evident. And so I'm not here to like really bust anybody over that, but I really think that even those of you who chose to close the plaza would look back in hindsight and recognize there might have been more productive ways forward, and that you were truly not forced by necessity to do so, but it was really an act of privilege that you all took. And you may have been within your legal right to do that, which I tried to dispute, but in the end, morally, it was not the right thing to do, and there were better ways that the situation could have been resolved. So I hope that looking back on that, and at the great problem facing us moving forward, that you choose to make more productive decisions surrounding those issues, because they're really important and critical right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to run, so I appreciate you.
Thanks, Mike. So with that, we'll move back to remonstrance. Again, any further remonstrance from the commissioners or response to public comment? Seeing and hearing none, is there any emergency business today?
No.
Any from the board? That gets us to the consent calendar for Tuesday, October 2nd, 2018. And these are items that are considered routine by the Board of Commissioners and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. There'd be no separate discussion on these items. If there was discussion desired, it would have been pulled during adjustments to the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar? Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to move approval of the consent calendar for October 2nd, 2018.
Second?
So it's been moved by Commissioner Lyken, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 4-0 with Commissioner Farr excused. And with that, that gets us down to county council announcements. And we do have need for executive session today, and that will be immediately following the regular business of the board.
It's my understanding that there are two items, the 6-month review of the performance auditor, and there was potentially a discussion related to the LCOG telecom contract, but Mr. Dingle indicated he was going to text me if we would still need to have that one. I haven't received a message from him on that, and so we're thinking we may not need to have that update that we're hopeful that we've reached resolution to the issues on the telecom system there. So we may only have need for that one 6-month review item.
Excellent. So with that, I'm going to move on down to county administration announcements. Mr. Mokhiski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the board allowing me to be out of the area last week. I was at the International City County Management Association on the East Coast, their annual conference in Baltimore and the DC area. It was a great, as you all know, I'm on the National Association of County Administrators Board, and so we meet at the ICMA annual conference, the NACO annual conference, and the NACO legislative conference. So it was a great opportunity to connect with peers from around the country. The president of that association, who's the former Johnson County, Kansas administrator, and now the only full-time professor of practice at Kansas University's master's program of public administration, which focuses on local government, is interested in visiting us. So he's going to be here. He was going to be in Portland in early November and wants to come down and visit us here in Lane County to learn more about our policy lab that we've developed with the University of Oregon, as well as some of the work that we put into place around employee engagement, some of the things that we're doing around our Emerging Leaders program, our mentoring program, our stay interviews, and those types of things. He was very interested in that, talked about some of the things that he did in Johnson County, Kansas before he left around those things, so wanted to learn from our experiences and try to take some of that as he continues his work to educate the future leaders and inspire the future leaders in local government. Last Friday, so again, I appreciate that, and that was a great conference. Last Friday, then, when I returned, I had an opportunity to speak to a group of, I'm not sure, commissioners, if you've heard of this organization that was founded in Portland and is now a national organization. It's ELGL, stands for Emerging Local Government Leaders. And it's sort of an affiliate of ICMA, and they have chapters at several universities around the country. They just went on a 10-college tour and with a program called ELGL Inspire, where they pulled together local government leaders from different areas, fire chiefs, police chiefs, city councilors, county administrators, librarians, so on and so forth, directors of parks and public works. And they bring them to the college campus and have them speak about their experiences. And again, the idea is to inspire the future of local government leaders. So I was asked to participate in that. Sarah Mederi is the Public Works Director at the City of Eugene, the Hillsborough Police Chief, the Tualatin Fire Chief, Parks Director in West Lynn, I think it was. So several of us, a City Councilor in Silverton, I believe, all participated and spoke to students here on the campus at the U of O, mostly graduate and undergraduate students in the 3 p.m. program who are interested in local government. So that was, again, a great, so we're trying to find these opportunities to build upon our policy lab, our internship program, and connecting with organizations that are working with young professionals, young college students who are interested in local government to make sure that we're inspiring the future leaders in our profession. So, Mr. Chair, I'm just taking some time here, if that's all right. I do have some other items, but I wanted to update since I wasn't here last week because I know that we want to allow for Commissioner Farr to get here. So, a few other items. I understand we had a light fixture fall last week. Thankfully, the commissioner who was sitting under the light fixture, I understand, had stepped out for a moment. And as I understand, it caused a bit of a ruckus, I know, and certainly our staff was really concerned about that, and we're glad that nobody was injured from that, but we took a significant amount of time and effort to figure out what had happened there, and we had a staff person who was on the roof, a maintenance employee who was on the roof doing some work, and some of that activity jarred that, and so that we've done some inspections there, and it was inspected on Wednesday. The light fixture was inspected Wednesday, September 26th and the lights over the commissioner's table have been secured with an additional screw. Staff is also working hard to avoid doing roof work during board meetings, so that was probably something that we hope will never happen again, and an anomaly, unique kind of situation. Commissioner Sorensen, you've been on the board for almost 20 years, so I'm not sure if you ever recall something like that happening, but
I think jackhammering during a board meeting was an interesting experience.
okay.
When they were doing the sidewalk, you missed that.
Yeah, that's right.
Not a lot of coordination there,
Yeah.
but
So we will,
survived.
we'll work to avoid, just wanted to let you know there was follow-up on that because I know that caused a bit of a ruckus. I had a request from the executive director of LTD. There's a Commissioner Lyken has historically served on the strategic planning committee for LTD. And this committee provides LTD Board of Directors with advice on strategic planning. And the question that Aurora Jackson asked me was, with Commissioner Lyken leaving the board and that seat, would the board like to continue to have a role on the strategic planning committee? And maybe Commissioner Lyken could share his experience and if there was value there. And I just wanted to seek the board's input on that item.
Anything you want to say about that?
So there's probably a little value. There's a little bit of value. Right now, I would say that it's very, very Eugene Springfield centric. The value probably comes more from the city councilors from Eugene and Springfield. But I think what may be helpful is with the with LCOG now getting some study money on the Eugene to Florence route, not that I'm trying to suggest Chair Bozovich add additional duties to him, but I think with that route now being studied as the future route with LTD, my guess is that's probably going to be discussed in the future. How much in the future, I don't know. And it doesn't have to be Jay. I mean, it could be anybody. I know Commissioner Farr serves the west side of Eugene. I think Commissioner Williams has part of that west, especially Churchill and some of that area as well. But I think because of that, I think in the future it may be beneficial to have a commissioner. But I would, not that I'm trying to be single focused, but with our ACT meetings for the last year, most of the public comment has come from people either living in Florence or living here who has really pushed for the LTD Eugene to Florence route. And there is a route beginning to happen between Florence and Yachats. So now the next phase is going to be this one from Eugene to. And with the construction that's happening with 126 West, or the future construction that we hope is going to happen with 126 West, I think it makes sense even from that vantage point, because whatever happens, LTD is going to be a part of that conversation because of, as I stated before, there is study money now involved that LCOG was able to get to study that route between Eugene and Florence. So that's my thoughts on it right now. The way the configuration is now, I would say that the board's had very little. I mean, you try to provide input, but it hasn't been that much. It's been really centered around Eugene primarily, with Springfield and the Main Street work that they're doing. But that's my overall thoughts. So the board can make a decision on who's the next in line, but expect for that conversation to be have. And with the Strategic Planning Committee, a lot of the conversations begin there and then are ultimately provided or inputted into the LTD board.
And I'd just add to that right now, I'm currently serving on a rates advisory committee to LTD that's met twice now and scheduled to meet a couple more times. And LTD is projected to get a significant amount of new income from the new state income tax through the STIF, as they call it now.
Stiff.
And one of the things the committee is looking at is how does that impact rates? How do we want to steer rates? And there's some of this issues around the future design of the system, whether it's designed for high ridership or for high level of service in neighborhoods. You know, is it better to focus on these high ridership mainline routes and more often, you know, more frequent buses? Or do you want to, you know, continue some of the distributed routes that they have in the neighborhoods? Service to rural areas is going to be an interesting conversation through the next couple of years with that increase in funding they have. So I think it's worth having a board member involved. We're going to have to, I think, sometime after November 6th, have a conversation about distribution of committee assignments and all that, because at least for me, I'm pretty well overwhelmed with just the public safety side of all my assignments, adding transportation, and we're going to have to distribute some other assignments that have fallen to Commissioner Lyken as, you know, over the years that weren't originally his, like the ONC counties position. So I think it's I think it's good for the county to have a voice in that strategic planning, because I think we bring a little bit different look than the metro-focused look. But it'll be really interesting. I think one of the things the rates committee is focused on right now is bringing back youth passes and trying to avoid some of the trip generation that comes with youth and parents playing mom's taxi service around here, and see if we can lower some of the trip rates with that youth pass system. So it's going to be interesting transition for mass transit over the next couple of years with that new income stream. So.
Okay, great. So I heard a yes on that. And so a couple other items here briefly. On October 16th, we're going to provide an update to the board on a request that was made, an assignment regarding the highest and best use of the Armory property at the Surbu campus. And I just wanted to share with the board that we've been, until we get to that update, there are a number of things that have come forward around use of fairgrounds property for by some external groups, use of the Armory property by some external groups. We've had the discussion certainly about the Forest Work Camp and advance that issue. It is really, these things have really caused us to reflect on what our long-term needs are in terms of space and facilities in the organization. We recognize that, you know, we've lost our capital projects manager several months ago, and we're in the process of replacing. We have interviews that are happening for that position here this week. And so we're hopeful that we will get that position filled and we'll be able to advance a facilities master plan conversation. Until we get to that point, I just wanted to share with the board that we really are spending some time here at the staff level looking at highest and best use of a number of these county-owned properties and considering what our future needs would be, as well as where there is an interest and a demand from the community for things. So we'll provide that update to you on the 16th, but I just wanted you to know that we're spending some time on that. I have here, and am in the process of reviewing, along with our H&HS Director and Human Services Division Manager, a request for applications for our Housing Improvement Plan, the HIP initiative that we included in the budget this year. And so I'll report to you in the future on where we're at with that process in receiving proposals and allocating resources. Almost done here, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to share with the board a couple of items coming up tomorrow. You are invited all tomorrow morning between 7 and 8:45 to the meet and greet for the Assistant Public Works Director finalists. I think we have three individuals who are finalists for that position. So that'll be out at the Delta campus in the Goodson room. From 7 to 8:45, drop by and grab some coffee and bagel and meet our three candidates for that important position. We have a lunch tomorrow with the judges and Robertson Sherwood and DLR, who we are working with around work related to the courthouse. And so we're advancing those efforts and our partnership with the courts. We have the Equity and Access Advisory Board at 5:30 tomorrow. That's actually at in Junction City, at the Junction City Local Aid on 210 East 6th Avenue in Junction City. Those are public meetings, so anyone is welcome to attend those. And I think I'm done, unless you have questions for me. Long and rambling, but that's what happens when I leave for a week and have a lot of pent-up issues to share with you.
Any questions for Commissioner Sorensen?
Yeah, you mentioned you were meeting with the architects, and you said we are meeting with the architects. Who's meeting with the architects?
I am the judges. All of the judges are invited to a lunch. I believe Commissioner Bozovich is the chair and the board's representative on the courthouse project. Greg Rickoff, Jim Cheney. I think that's the bulk of Liz Rambo. So this is focused. It's really focused on the Robertson, Sherwood, and DLR, who we've brought on board to do some preliminary massing of the facility to share their work so far with the judges.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So if not, I'm going to move on down to Commissioner's business and call for Commissioner's announcements. Announcements from Commissioners. Yeah. Commissioner Sorensen.
I'll just mention that of interest to South Eugene residents that the groundbreaking for Civic Park will be on Sunday, October 7th at 2 o'clock at Civic Park. Civic Park is better known to longtime Eugene residents as Civic Stadium, but Civic Stadium burned down, so now we have Civic Park. And the organizations that have been involved in designing and showing Civic Park, the Eugene Civic Alliance being the biggest one, they are having this groundbreaking there. And of course, the major component of the Civic Park will be the kids sports facility that will be located there. So for anyone in the area who wishes the best for the former Civic Stadium site, it's open to the public on Sunday afternoon.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure and remind commissioners that there will be a joint elected officials meeting with the City of Eugene next Wednesday at noon. And that will be an opportunity for the contractor that looked at our system for providing services to the unhoused and in Lane County, mapping out that system and presenting some of their findings and a draft of some of their recommendations. At that meeting, there will be time for comment and questions from the commissioners and counselors, and we'll be doing two counselors, one commissioner, sort of alternating speaking, and everyone will get an opportunity. There will be timers, though, and you'll be limited to 2 minutes, similar to city council, so we can at least get through one complete opportunity for everybody to have a chance to ask a question or comment on that presentation. And hopefully by using 2 minutes, we might get to a second round if needed. So everybody will have an opportunity to speak at that meeting. But we will not be taking public comment at that meeting because the time is constrained. There will be a session in the evening that Livewell Lane is sponsoring at LCC's downtown campus starting at 5:30, which I believe you all have received an invitation to. And there is confirmed that there'll be a quorum of the board there. So it's a noticed public meeting. Although it's going to be a presentation from the consultants on their findings and draft recommendations again, and an opportunity for the public to provide some input back to the consultants so they can draft those comments, take those into consideration as they're preparing their final draft. It won't be a board, we won't be taking official public comment as the board. The comments really going to the consultants at that time, but it's an opportunity for the board kind of to sit and listen and maybe hear some of the public, and that's why I encourage the board to show up. Please check in and make sure I have clear attendance of who attends, because I'll be, quote, the minutes taker for that meeting, that public meeting, and making sure I keep attendance and minutes together. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that we do have a Wednesday lunchtime session next week, and then there is that 5:30 public meeting that there'll be a quorum of board members attending, and because we may utilize information gathered in that meeting in the future decisions around this system of service, that's why it's a notice public meeting and not just a public event. So wanted to make sure that was clear to everybody. Any other announcements from the board? Seeing none, then I'm going to move on to agenda team request, work session request. Are there any agenda team or work session requests from the board? If not, I have one that I want to move forward and ask for 3 head nods on. As you may be aware, I've been working on trying to resolve some issues relative to the impacts of the Oregon Country Fair on surrounding neighbors. That has developed into a look at how we permit the temporary campgrounds surrounding the country fair, and an actual look at that we need to amend lane code to provide for that system of permitting. And that will be very similar to our outdoor assembly piece of code that's in Chapter 3 right now. And so it won't be a major effort by staff, but in order to kind of start that process, because it's going to be more than 15 minutes of staff time, and it ultimately will result in an ordinance coming before the board in a public hearing, I'd like to get the consent of at least 2 other board members so staff can move ahead with that. It also will push some of the LMD's work plan back a little bit as they address that issue. But I think it's needs to get done quickly with the 50th anniversary coming up next year, and we need to have this system in place prior to campgrounds deciding to be open for the next country fair. So with that, can I get an indication if folks are supportive of placing that into the work plan and as a future agenda item for possible code amendment? So I can see Commissioner Williams, Commissioner Lycan assenting to that, so we at least have the 3, and Commissioner Sorensen also, so we actually have 4 head nods for that staff from LMD and County Council will develop a code amendment that will come back to us in the form of an ordinance relative to temporary campground permitting. I don't know if that will be the title of it, because there's statutory definitions of some of the things around campgrounds. We have to make sure we're labeling it correctly, because there is OAR and ORS relative to campgrounds. So with that, are there any other agenda team or work session requests? Well, Commissioner Farr, my apologies. We have to continue to move on with our agenda, and we're going to move to item 8B, which is our quarterly update of the 2018-2021 Lane County Strategic Plan. And I'll invite Judy Williams, our Strategic Planning and Budget Supervisor, up. So,
Chair, as Judy's getting the presentation, I think we have a presentation ready to go here. I'll just make a couple introductory comments. You know, the board's obviously has been actively involved in the strategic plan update. We've gone around, and Judy will touch on this, over 20 meetings we've held across the organization with the majority of our employees have been able to attend and hear about and participate in the conversation about the future direction of the organization and the board's plan going forward. That's been really productive. We also, and Judy's done a fantastic job, she'll touch on this, have really put a focus on making sure that we have systems in place to collaborate across the organization to achieve success, to follow through and have accountability for each of our individual initiatives. And you're going to hear about a few of these today, but I've been really pleased with the creation of steering committees over each of the priority areas, a quarterly meeting with all of our appointed and elected directors to track progress, and then these updates that we bring to the board. So I think you're going to see that this is, as we said with the plan itself, it was an evolution of a plan. The foundational elements that we put into place to track and manage the work is also an evolution in a really positive direction. So I'll turn it over to Judy to walk through this.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Bozovich and Commissioners. So this is our first quarterly update with the new strategic plan, so I'm excited to walk through a little bit of that with you. And I wanted to briefly kind of run over a couple of things, kind of first starting with the communication aspect of the new strategic plan. As you remember, in March is when we adopted the strategic plan. So we've been working hard to have a communication plan in place so that we've been, as Steve, County Administrator, mentioned, we've been rolling this out to at least 25 work groups in all the various locations with staff, to our emerging leaders group, to supervisors and managers, and really addressing not just the detail of the strategic plan, but as you know, we also updated our vision, mission, and values. So just meeting with staff and reiterating what the mission, vision, and values are. And we did go from 7 values that we had previously to the 3, as you know. And those are integrity, excellence, equity, and respect. We also added the new purpose. Again, this is not new to you, but just a summary of what we've been talking with staff about. And that new purpose is to improve lives. And the new core behaviors as passion to serve, driven to connect, and focus on solutions. And it's been, I went along with the county administrator to most of those work group sessions, and they've all been really informative. There's been great questions asked, and we were able to really connect with each work group. So if we went out to behavioral health, they would hear a little bit about what are some of the details that we have in the strategic plan, such as item 1B3, behavioral health, and rolling it out to the rural communities. Also 1D2, which is my sheet here, but the public safety aspect and collaborating with public safety and behavioral health. So it was exciting to be able to address that with each of the work groups and really show how they can be a part of that strategic plan. And then this is, again, the first quarterly update, and we did take some time with this, so it has been since March, since you're hearing an update, and we wanted to really take the time, be methodical, and do this right, not just do it to do it, but really be methodical, and what do we want to track over the next 3 years? How do we want to put the structure around this plan? So we have several key initiatives that we have in terms of the 4 priority areas, which are safe, healthy county, vibrant communities, robust infrastructure, and our people and partnerships. And under those initiatives, there's also key activity areas, which we have 47 activity areas. And so the first thing that we did was the directors and myself met a couple of times and really wanted to have that collaborative effort, but also a consensus on what do we want to do, in terms of tracking and reporting on this plan. We could have gone in the direction of really focusing on department strategic plans, but it was really the consensus of the group was to really hone in on those 47 activity areas, create work plans for each of those activity areas, assign leads to those and really have that accountability for a number of folks going out and actually, they're the ones doing the work for a lot of these strategic plan efforts. And so assigning the leads and sponsors for all of those work plans. And I noted that attachment B is where, if you were following along in the board packet, is where you can see those leads identified for all of those initiatives. And then, as Steve mentioned, we created some quarterly meetings that we're going to carry on throughout the rest of the term of this plan. And it's been an eye-opening process. It's been fun creating it and also gathering all of the leads. So what we did is gathered all the leads from each priority area. So everyone from Vibrant Communities got in the same room, and we really talked about, what are the goals that we want to accomplish? Is there any other collaboration efforts that we can connect with and take care of? Is there any challenges that are that folks are facing and that we needed to talk a little bit more about? But it was really a good discussion that the group had, and so those are going to be exciting groups that will continue carrying on throughout the rest of the plan. So after we finished those 4 strategic steering committee meetings, we then met with the directors again so that they could see some of the progress, hear from what some of if there were challenges. There's several work plans where it's not just, one person is the lead, but there could be 2 leads or co-leads from different departments. And so really trying to work together and how can we best approach each of these work plans and move forward. And I put a quote up there. One of the actual activity items is related to the tracking and monitoring, and we really do want to have that. This is more of an evolution of the plan, and to really have that collaborative and also decentralized approach. So really involving a lot more people this time around in terms of communication, tracking, and monitoring. And then again, in your packet, so attachment C is a compilation of all of these work plans. So I just wanted to put one up there just so that anyone following along could see, this is the level of this is the detail that we've decided on for each of these 47 activity areas. So they're nice one-pagers that we'll be updating on a quarterly basis that really just tell you what's the initiative, what's the exact activity area, who's the lead, who's the sponsor, is there a team members? Oftentimes there's outside agencies, partners that we're working with. What are some of the outputs and intended outcomes that we're hoping to achieve, as well as projects and status for each of those projects? And then towards the bottom, there's an overall status for each activity area. So on this one, you can see towards the bottom right that it's a yellow triangle. So it's really just trying to monitor where are we at with each of these work plans. And then each of those feeds into, we were hoping for just kind of a simple one-pager kind of scorecard or dashboard, if you will, so that you can see where what the status is for each of those items. And so there is some color coding so you can at least differentiate the Safe and Healthy County versus Vibrant Communities and so forth. So all of those 47 work plans do roll up into this one-page summary. And I also gave you a handout too up there earlier. It was just a new kind of updated, and I can laminate them later if you want to. But just the one pager on one side with the other side has this summary on it. So I know that this is small for anyone trying to follow along, but again, it's in the board packet, attachment D, so it's just a good summary that we'll be updating on a quarterly basis, so you can easily tell how we're doing. And then another quote that just kind of resonated as everyone, this is a true team effort. So it's not just me pulling all of this information together. I couldn't do it without all of the staff that are working on each of these items, certainly the leads that are assigned and accountable for each of those, the directors, which are sponsors for each of these items in their respective areas. And so all of us working together, it's really kind of that individual commitment to a group effort. And that's what makes a team work, a company work, a society work, a civilization work. And I just found that quote to be inspiring for this work. And then I'm going to turn it over. The other piece of what I was hoping to do for these quarterly updates in the future is to hear from other folks besides myself. So, if there's highlights that we want to highlight or successes that we want to lift up, we'll be inviting other guest speakers to you to hear from on a quarterly basis, just to get a flavor of what are some of the pieces that we're working on. And so I did reach out to each of you as the commissioners to see if there was any interest in hearing from a particular area. And so we've worked that into some of the updates that we're going to be doing. So at this point, I will turn it over, and we have a few guest speakers that are going to come up and do a quick couple minutes update on their items. So I think first is Karen Gaffney.
Behind you here.
At the table.
She's walking again.
I know, every step. Morning, Chair Bozovich and Commissioners. It's actually a great opportunity for me to spend just a couple minutes lifting up this particular strategic priority that I know we've been working on for quite some time here as an organization, and it's specifically to increase housing options for residents to reduce incidents of homelessness and increase affordability. So the piece I wanted to focus on today is an update on our work. It's 1A, and sorry, this particular page isn't numbered in the packet, but I want to give huge thanks to Steve Manella, who's the team lead on this particular project. And as you know, several of these items are really coming to fruition this month. Earlier in the meeting, Chair Bozovich talked about the joint meeting we have next week with the City of Eugene, and that's to review the homeless systems analysis and shelter feasibility study that's called out in this particular strategy. So that is one of your areas that is green on this map, and really moving forward with identifying specifically what are the needs in terms of moving our system forward. I would also mention in the same strategy is our work around the MLK housing project. I know we came to you several months ago to initiate the MOU with Homes for Good. We continue to move forward in securing financing on that particular project. We have heard back in the affirmative from the Oregon Health Authority with grant dollars towards that project. Our healthcare partners are pledging funds towards that, and we remain hopeful that we're on track to finalize the funding this fall and be able to move toward closing and groundbreaking next year. And then the other piece I would lift up from this particular strategy is project number 4, our frequent user service engagement strategy, which is really that effort aimed at identifying those people who are the highest impact to our public safety and health systems, identifying them, doing street outreach to help get them ready for housing, and then moving them into permanent supportive housing. And we have recently, in addition to the funding we secured from Trillium to expand that project this year, we've heard from SAMHSA at the federal level that they are committing funds to growing the outreach part of that project with a 5-year grant to support that development. So we're feeling really good about solidifying that work moving forward. So I'll pause there. Judy said I had a couple minutes, so I don't know if people have questions, if you want to do that, or how you want to manage this. But I'm happy to answer any questions on this strategy.
Certainly can take it questions now.
Any questions from the board on the affordable housing piece of this? I just one sort of comment that I'm a little concerned because I think I'm not sure this piece is being captured. And maybe it falls under 1B too, but I as as I was thinking about varied housing options, for me, that goes beyond just government-provided housing. It's about providing better options for private sector provision of housing, and making it easier to build much more diverse housing out there. It seems like we've fallen into two categories of providing housing, in the private side. It's either single-family homes or it's apartment complexes. And that, we have this huge, what we call the missing middle, whether it's row homes, group homes, to the ADU discussions we've been having. And I just want to make sure we don't fail to capture our efforts in land management and through Alex Kyler to, one, get the allowance of ADUs in rural residential areas, and that expanding those options for housing and opportunities for housing, as well as any efforts we're making in land management to make it easier to permit housing and particularly varied types of housing, and any work we're doing at the state has to adopt building code. We can't really do that, but that supports tiny housing, which doesn't just impact rural, but also impacts, urban housing inside UGBs. Anything we can do that makes the tiny homes building codes easier will make tiny homes easier. And I understand there's been quite a bit of pushback from the state BCDS folks recently on tiny homes code. So just a comment that I don't want to lose that side of this, because at least looking at the 1A, 1B, I'm not seeing that captured. And in addition to that, the partnership that we need to continue to work with the City of Eugene and other municipalities around UGB expansion for residential lands, and particularly with the City of Eugene around establishing the urban reserves and moving forward with the check-in on where they are, because that's a huge, we can't out in rural areas, even with ADUs and all that, really supply our ultimate future housing needs. That's going to have to happen within UGBs. So, continuing those partnerships to advance those as we co-adopt and push on those is a really important piece of long-term housing affordability.
It's not lost, Mr. Chair. So item 1, Karen is giving an update on 1A2, which is varied housing options to address homelessness focused on supportive housing. 1A1 is affordable housing. It's actually convene, sponsor, and implement a collaborative multi-jurisdictional affordable housing action plan. That effort we met, and I'm leading that effort. We met 2 weeks ago. We had the City of Eugene, city manager from Eugene, city manager from Springfield, Homes for Good executive director, Better Housing Together lead, our land management division manager, our public works director, our economic development team, and I think that was most of who was there. So that was our first effort to bring together that team to focus really on the housing affordability and affordable housing multi-jurisdictional action plan that we're working on developing. So we've got, I think we heard loud and clear from the board that you wanted both. You want to make sure that we're focusing on the poverty and homelessness and supportive housing area, as well as the housing affordability and affordable housing needs. You were there as well, weren't you?
I was.
And Karen was there at that affordable housing. So we've got you covered.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just want to
I think
clarify
Judy
that.
mentioned there are 47 different strategies, so.
Great. I just want to make sure that was covered. I appreciate that. Any other questions for Karen? Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to echo Commissioner Bozovich's comments about zoning and land use planning. There needs to be some flexibility there if we're looking at condensed housing and the smaller homes. I would encourage anybody and everybody to take a look at Simplicity Homes in Cottage Grove. Just built 32 rental units. These are 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom homes. Very, very small, very compact, very attractive. I canvassing that neighborhood last week. I talked to the neighbors that had some concerns about that tiny home project going into that adjacent to a very nice newly built subdivision. So there was kind of this NIMBYism thing going on. They had theirs, and there was this remnant piece of property where there could be an opportunity, in this case, for 32 individual dwelling units. It's absolutely a wonderful thing to see, and I would encourage anybody and everybody to go see that. But I also look at Square One and what they're doing in the area of housing. And again, there's a project that I'm familiar with that's going in Cottage Grove, which is a Square One project with partners and associates. And that too is very exciting. We have seen how those things work and how well they work and how well they're accepted in their neighborhood. So I see those as being a critical piece. You have the accessory dwelling units infill in metro areas, but to take a piece of property that it traditionally would have put in 3 or 4 homes where you could put in 20 or 30, it just makes sense. The affordability for people that each month we all that are property owners, we see our equities going up in our properties. Every time those things happen, from month to month, every 30 days, individuals and young families or others that would qualify for a home loan, in 30 days, that's beyond their reach because their wages are stagnant, but the cost of housing continues to go up. So it's a very, very critical situation that many people, one month they're qualified, the next month maybe not. And so we need to take a look at that as well and how we get stability there. So, thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. By way of information on the housing component, I just went to the Tiny Fest.
Yeah.
Did you go to that or hear of it?
I was not
All
there.
right. Well, these are homes that are, some of them are built, some of them are built on trailers. And apparently they go around the Northwest, in fact, maybe even the whole West, maybe in the whole country, and hold these festivals. This one happened to be at our Lane County Fairgrounds. And it's really interesting. Some of them are quite small, i.e. tinier on the tiny housing continuum. Some are kind of big. So I even think, did they qualify for the whole Tiny Fest? Seemed kind of big. But I'm not an expert after 4 hours of looking at tiny homes. But, you know, it seems like a lot of people were glomming onto me like I had something to do with the regulation of all this. And, you know, there's an urban component to it. There's a rural component to it. I just think it's something for us to, you know, does everybody have to live in a giant house? I mean, maybe at some point in your life, either because you don't have the money or because you don't want to spend the time, you could have a smaller home. So I think that it's a phenomenon that I think is with us, and I think we better get plugged into it and try to figure out how to facilitate it because people do want it. I'm curious whether or not the housing is the main thing you're going to identify, because I saw this press release saying that in the normal period of time between September 21 and 23, normally there's 7 emergency room visits from heroin-related overdoses, but this September 21 to 23, there were 21 heroin overdose spikes. Seems like there's a lot of public health issues out there. Could you just narrow that down for me? Is housing the main thing, or is housing one thing and then, you know, heroin overdoses and public health issues are also on the list?
Chair Bozovich and Commissioner Sorensen, I absolutely would not tell you we're only focused on one thing at Health and Human Services.
Yeah.
The heroin overdoses that you identified are critically important in the community. And at some point, if the board would like an update on that, we'd be happy to do that. Dr. Ledke, as the health officer, and Elizabeth Maxwell, who's our coordinator in our opiate prevention program, have been working with the hospital emergency departments, the medical examiner, law enforcement, and others to not only gather up-to-date information about those overdoses, but then really look at what is behind this particular spike. So for today, we're talking about this particular element of the county's strategic plan, because that was lifted up. I know there's another strategy relative to behavioral health treatment, and we can certainly talk about that at some point if the board would like as well.
Okay, thanks.
And I will also remind the board, we also have a set of legislative priorities in which we've included quite a bit about opiates, and particularly about making sure that Narcan's available in more places. And in fact, 3 initiatives that our Lane County staff wrote have been wrapped into the opiates task force recommendations going forward to the legislature this spring. So it's not something we're ignoring by far. And in fact, in those overdoses, the fact that Narcan was available in the emergency services people's hands saved many a life in the last week or so. So it just having better availability of that, also making sure people understand that is only a temporary measure, that there's still hospitalization required after administration of that for continued treatment is really important and is still a priority of this board. It just shows up in different places. Any other questions on housing? Thank you, Karen.
All right, so I will turn it over to Dan to talk about roads and bridges, and then we'll pop back up and Austin can talk about broadband after that.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. So I'd like to update you on priority 3B1 under robust infrastructure, and that is to ensure a safe and resilient road and bridge system for Lane County. So with 1,400 miles of roads and about 420 bridges, there's always a lot of work to be done in this, and it's something we've been working on and will continue to work on. However, with new money coming in from the state, we're more able to provide services to upkeep this system. I'd like to update you on a few projects underneath this priority. The first of those is to complete the jurisdictional transfer of Territorial Highway, Jasper Parkway, and Cloverdale Roads with the state of Oregon. So that's actually a 3-part jurisdictional transfer, and the board approved the first piece with an IGA with the state to transfer the Jasper Parkway. We're still working on the territorial piece and Delta Highway, but we're very close. We've been having a flurry of meetings over the last couple of weeks to get down to what was really the last issue. There's an issue of contamination in the soil and under the road adjacent to the city of Veneta due to an old leaking storage tank. And so we're not wanting to take on more liability for the county and taking over the road. So we're almost to a deal on that, and I think we'll be able to have that to you probably next month, bringing the agreement for your authorization. So we're excited to move forward with that. That's been a project that's been in the works for many years, and we're almost to the end there. The second project underneath that is to build a public works asset management program. We've also been very busy with this one. Over the last couple of weeks, we saw 4 product demos from different companies that provide these asset management software programs. And we were very excited with one of them. The vendor is DTS, and we'll be moving forward with them. We're in contract negotiations. It's a very robust system that will allow us to track the conditions of our assets and any treatments so that we can do budget analysis and make sure that we're prioritizing where we're putting our money to get the most bang for the buck. It's such a robust system that I think we'll actually be able to use this across the department and put it to use in parks and facilities and possibly even waste management. So I think we'll be able to get a lot of value out of this asset management program. Another one is to revise and update Lane Code Chapter 15. So this is our section in Lane Code that deals with roads. We haven't updated this for many years, but there's been a project underway to get this going, and with the road maintenance manager, Oren Schumacher, and his project lead on this, Jennifer Paw. They've had a lot of great work on this, and I anticipate that we'll be coming back to you probably winter with some updates to suggest for updating that section of lane code. And then the fourth one I'll update is a project to onboard and train the new bridge maintenance team for Lane County Roads Division. So, as you're aware, we had to cut down to one bridge maintenance crew, but with the new state funding, we were able to restore a full crew. They now have one summer under their belt and are getting trained, but with 420 bridges, there's a lot left to learn, so we're still working on that project. Any questions?
Commissioner Sorensen.
I'm interested in what we're doing or what the status is on the culverts and the salmon. Can you describe that, what we're doing?
Yes, that was a project, so we used to do lots of culvert replacements. So as you're probably aware, in time, small culverts will erode beneath them, and then the salmon aren't able to migrate upstream to spawning areas, and so it cuts off miles of stream over time. So we have a lot of these culverts in our system. And
Do you have any idea how many?
I don't. I can get that information.
Is that something that data is kept on?
It is, yes.
Okay.
So I'll get that.
What is that called in the culvert business?
I couldn't.
Salmon killing culverts inventory system?
Council, and I'm not sure, but they track miles of impeded salmon habitat, and I'll find out what that is.
Okay,
Get that to the-
salmon.
So we used to do these quite regularly with our special projects crew, but with funding issues, we had to cut that program. But we're restoring that. We're looking at doing one of these large culvert projects a year. So we are planning those, and that's done through our road and bridge maintenance crew. So I'm not
Is that part of the robust infrastructure?
I don't think we have a project specifically for this, but it is part of our infrastructure, our stormwater system.
Okay. Is there somebody in the Public Works Department that deals with culverts specifically? Is there like a
Yes, this would fall
culvert
under
crew or?
Yeah, under our bridge crew. So Greg Boyle is the supervisor there. And I'll work on getting an update for you on that.
Okay, thank you.
And I am aware that most of the watershed councils have a pretty well inventoried where there's migration issues relative to culverts, and have been working through a prioritized replacement program, and some of that, at least I know in the Long Tom and the Sayus Law, has been funded through RAC funding of Title III of the Secure Rural Schools funding. So as that got re-upped, there's more money that's gone into that, and then comes back into the communities for some of those culvert replacements. I know when I did a forest tour several years back, we looked at the one on Sayus River Road out near Alma that was replaced with a large arch span to provide salmon passage. So those projects are being chipped away, but I think it's in cooperation and collaboration with the watershed councils, as they're best able to tell us what the priorities are for culvert replacement versus us trying to keep track. You know, we're looking at road miles. We're not looking at reach miles of streams, channels. They're better able at doing that. So it's, I think, a great collaborative process, and does have a funding stream through the forest timber dollars from the federal government, and through our watershed council funding from lottery dollars too. So any other, Commissioner Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad that you mentioned watershed councils. Very, very important work that they do in cooperation with other partners, public and private. Would not want to let this opportunity go by to once again sing praises to the road crews and the work that they have done. I get a lot of phone calls from folks in the rural area about road conditions. This summer, it's been different than last summer, and that people are happy with what they are seeing. Great improvements, safety improvements, surface improvements. I'm also reminded this last week, the Board of Commissioners received a letter from a citizen that used Armitage Park They had a wonderful experience at Armitage, saying praises about how great of a facility that was. They were looking forward to going to another, I believe, Lane County Park, perhaps on the coast. But, you know, we oftentimes get letters talking about deficiencies and things we could do better. Seldom do we get those where people take the time to compliment. So for me, I'm grateful to those people, but I'm glad that, that they took the time to address the commissioners on that so that we could pass those praises and kudos on. Done a terrific job, and I appreciate what I see on the highways. I appreciate what I see in our parks and other infrastructures. The culvert thing is huge. Fishing and wildlife is something we should have a strong focus on, and making sure that we have vibrant fisheries. Last week, I had an opportunity to go with farm and forest folks up into the Mosby Creek, where they were doing a rehabilitation of stream beds. This is my 4th trip up there over the last 15 or more years. First time I went to see that work was right after woody debris had been put into the tributaries to build up sandbars. 2 or 3 years later, I went back and I could see tangible results of spawning grounds being built. As a civilian, I went up once a few years ago, and then just last week was up. And so I've got about a 15 or a 16-year opportunity incrementally every 4 years or so to take a look at what's working. There are culverts along the way that you can do a lot of work at the headwaters, but the fish need to get to the headwaters. And so what you're doing in the culvert work is very, very important, and I thank you for that.
Yeah, and I want to spend a minute to just also say thanks for some of the great work. I've gotten some notice from constituents also in the rural areas about everything from our reestablishment of dust control on Hall Road. I've gotten notes of thanks from the constituents there, to some notice about what a wonderful paving job was done on Crow Road. You know, it's really great, and I have to thank Commissioner Lyken for the work that he did on House Bill 2017 and helping shepherd that through, because those projects may not have happened, and that dust control wouldn't have happened without that additional funding that was established through that bill. So I just want to thank you. And also, you know, we're talking about infrastructure here and roads, but I think our strategy 2B2 captures the concerns about fish culverts and all that, as we're pursue programs and practices that reduce impacts and leverage the natural environment to enhance livability and economic development. I mean, that speaks exactly to the cooperation I was talking about between our watershed councils and our roads departments in doing culvert replacements. When I first came on the commission, we were finishing up a lot of those culvert replacements from SRS money. I remember some on Scheffler Road that were causing issues for my regular bike routes and all that. So they were going on, and they did dwindle off as we lost our Secure Rural Schools funding and some of our funding streams. But now with House Bill 2017, re-up of the SRS money, and we'll see where that goes in the future. Hopefully we can continue chipping away at those priority fish passage issues. And we'll keep track of that possibly under item 2B2. Any other questions on roads and infrastructure? Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Commissioners. I appreciate your acknowledgement of the great work that our crews are doing, and to be able to pass on those kind words to staff. Thank you very much.
And then we'll have Austin come and talk about the broadband in the rural areas. Item 2A1, if you're following along. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm excited to share our progress regarding expanding broadband in our rural communities. It has become a majority of our work in economic development, and that's because what was once thought of as a luxury, we're starting to realize having reliable, high-speed internet relates to so many factors for a good quality of life, whether it's healthcare and telemedicine, the way people socialize these days and have healthy relationships, being able to run a business and earn a stable income, and even it improves home values. And so what was a luxury is almost becoming a public good. And so we're doing everything we can to build relationships in the region. A few examples of those, we're working with the city of Veneta, Lane Electric, ODF, the Corps, and our public works folks to move a project along to get fiber to Veneta in those areas. We're also working with Douglas Fastnet and Cottage Grove to get internet to the schools as well as the industrial park and residential areas. We're working with Emerald Broadband in Oak Ridge and West Fir on expanding wireless areas in very rural areas. And we're also working in the Triangle Lake area. We're working in Camp Creek neighborhood of Springfield. And each one of these projects uses different technologies, different forms of broadband or fiber, and has unique challenges. The geography of our county makes getting fiber everywhere very difficult and very expensive. And so we're constantly keeping an eye on new ways around the country to get high-speed internet, whether it's wireless, whether it's fiber, more traditional established means like cable and coax using copper infrastructure. We're doing really everything we can, and I'll be attending a telecom conference later this month with a lot of internet service providers, and I'm looking forward to learning more about creative problem solving. And nobody seems to have a silver bullet in terms of getting fiber into these rural communities, but we really dove in, and it's been a pleasure to help serve these communities in that way.
So questions or comments on the broadband? Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I appreciate the update on the broadband piece, and it's always interesting when you put an agenda out to discuss the strategic plan on the changes that happened prior to that. And so yesterday, a big announcement of the new USMCA, the replacement of NAFTA. And I bring that forward because sector strategy is probably going to start playing even a larger role than maybe we've ever seen, especially now that Canada has agreed. And part of those areas that Canada has agreed to push back on, because they were really pushing forward on, or actually alleviate a lot of the issues, are dairy and wood. I don't know about you, but those play significant roles right here in Lane County. By the way, the market's reacting very good. In the last 2 days, the markets have just jumped way up. So there's a lot of excitement about the fact that there is now an agreement. They have to be voted on. These won't go into effect in probably 2020, so you're a year away. But it's interesting. So, and I don't want to take away from 281 at all, because I think that this is going to play a huge vital role, especially in our communities outside of the metro area, especially up Oak Ridge. Oak Ridge, something like this is going to be significant. This has also been a big push by AOC. They've been looking at this. In fact, Steve Schaefer, who's a judge in the eastern part of the county, has really been leading the effort for Associated Oregon Counties on rural broadband. And so that you're going to have strong support from AOC on this as well. But so I appreciate the work that's being done here, but I just wanted to make note of that huge agreement. And I've read a little bit of what's in it and the benefits that are potential here for us. They're there. And especially once we get, I think, a stronger footing on what the rail's going to look like, what our ports are going to look like. But you heard Brian Rooney talk about that Canada is the most strategic trading partner that we have. And Oregon we're a traded sector economy. That's what we rely on. And having Canada come on board now really, I think, sends a huge positive message, but also the overall economy to Oregon. But Lane County is in a great strategic position to play a huge role in that and to see those benefits come forward. So just want to make note of that. And I just wanted to say to you, Austin, on a personal basis, you've been a really welcome to Lane County. And I just want to say thank you for your efforts, especially working rural Lane County, kind of lift all that off Sarah. She seemed to be doing triple and quadruple duty there for a while. But I want to say thank you very much for that. I hear good feedback, and it's always good to hear from folks outside of Eugene Springfield that, hey, Lane County does care about us after all, and has been, obviously, but having your presence out there has been really, really excellent. So I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the work that you've been doing on broadband. I know it's made a difference of the Highway 58 corridor, West Fur, the Douglas Fastnet in South Lane County, integrating with the schools, huge. So this is one of those things that wasn't too many years ago when, as I was mayor in Cottage Grove, students in Eugene and Springfield were able to do their homework and do stuff via the internet. There was the digital divide, which was 18 miles wide. It did not, internet services did not make it to Cottage Grove. Our children, our students, were, it's almost like a Stone Age thing compared to modern living. You have to have the right tools for a good education. And in this modern world, it is internet and connectability. So it was very disappointing that we, being a small rural community, major providers didn't see any viability in our small market, so they just avoided us. City of Cottage Grove actually started their own internet service, and after we got into that field at great expenditures, then the major providers came in. Today they're ubiquitous. There are many of them, and they are everywhere. But I personally experienced that digital divide that still exists in our rural areas. And I'm very, very thankful that we're able to mitigate that and continue to bring these people into the 21st century with internet services. You mentioned the health aspects of that. A lot of folks obviously have to go to a city or a community that has health services, but to get results and other data back, they either have to go in there, do hard copy or something. You can do that over the internet if you have the connectability. So there's the education piece of that. Talk about small businesses. Again, my experience in Cottage Grove after we lost the base industry in the 80s, which was timber-related jobs, Cottage Grove, like many communities, had to reinvent themselves and figure out what are we going to do. And so one of those things that was just a godsend was that opportunity to move forward in that vein. So I just thank you for making this a priority. People reinvented themselves in Cottage Grove because they found a way to do a cottage industry and retool, reinvent. And today it's a vibrant community, not solely timber dependent, although it's a great industry still working in our community. But having the internet and having those kinds of capabilities in a community helps that community grow. And without it, it doesn't grow. And we know what happens when things don't grow. They stay stagnant or they fall behind. So with that, this is one of the key pieces rural Lane County needs to really focus on. And I appreciate your work in that area. Glad you're aboard, too. As was said, Sarah was doing an excellent job. I'm glad that you're there, that there can be more of a laser focus on things such as internet capabilities. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just one moment here. Thanks very much, Austin, and thank you for the work you're doing on broadband. You know, we spent a little bit of time up in West for a couple of weeks ago, and that place is, you know, you think of it as being kind of a spiraling down community. Quite the contrary. That place is poised, and a part of it is getting services to make it so that people can work from their buildings, work from their homes. The facilities that are now empty, that someday will not be empty. It's very, very exciting, the work that's happening there. I'm going to, for 1 second, I'm going to step back to Safe Healthy County. I just made a presentation to Peace Health on our FUSE program. It's actually your presentation, Ms. Gaffney. Thank you. And that wasn't what it was about, but it was talking about, what I talked about was our strategic plan and how everything wraps into the strategic plan, including what was important to them, the Safe Healthy County. And thank you for providing this, because I left my laminated copy at Peace Health this morning. So could you laminate this for me? Thank you. And I'm sorry I missed the presentation from the health department regarding Safe Healthy Counties.
Yeah, you actually missed Public Works also. We had to move Dan up a little bit because I think he has a 10:30 or something.
Okay. Well, thank you for accommodating that. I apologize for the disruption I caused. Thanks. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, we did our best to slow things down for you, Commissioner
That's
Carr.
what Steve Dingle said on his way out, my way in.
But, yeah, and I just want to thank you for the report on the broadband. It's become an incredibly important aspect of our society today. It's part of the wave of employment in the future. You know, as I look at, you know, my wife is employed as a business owner. We have our business at our rural home because we have broadband access to our home, and she produces a magazine that is distributed nationally and internationally from Elmira, Oregon. You know, it's a pretty amazing thing to be able to do. And our employees are local single moms that have flexible work schedules to match in with their kids that are, you know, we just happen to be next door to the high school. Their kids are in high school, you know, that sort of thing. It's just, you know, the amount of vehicle miles traveled that saves, not having, you know, and the issues with, you know, parental supervision, everything else, having those, you know, young mothers having to commute into Eugene for employment, you know, being able to be right there in Elmira, and that opportunity for rural employment in the home with high-speed internet is just an incredible piece, not to mention the extension of services in the rural areas. One of the future things about, you know, and we have access to health care up in our strategic plan. One of the ways of gaining access to health care is telemedicine, particularly in rural areas. Well, if you don't have high-speed internet or internet at all, which some of Lane County doesn't. I mean, if you're on the north-facing hillside in Deadwood, there isn't internet really available, you know, because CenturyLink doesn't reach there. There's not cable out there. And if you're facing north, you don't see any satellites. You know, so how do you get telemedicine in Deadwood? And, you know, Triangle Lake, I'm glad we're working on that. There is no Verizon service in Triangle Lake. If you get way up on the hill above the high school, you walk up above the high school on the field, you can get a bar. Because I've been up there and had to do that. So, you know, getting broadband out there is such an important piece of just being able to communicate with the world in general. And just, you know, the opportunities it opens up to provide services, you know, because everyone always talks, you know, oh, you can get that information on Lane County's website. Well, if you can't access the internet, you're not accessing Lane County's website. In areas where there's no broadband and no cellular service, you're really limited on being able to access a lot of services. So this is not just about economic development. It's also about our ability to project services in rural areas. So really appreciate that work. I do have one quick question, though, and that's on our ability maybe to leverage some of the work private providers are doing. There's been I've gotten a lot of questions from folks in Lorain, which is another isolated community relative to broadband. Charter has, a contractor to Charter potentially has been placing some fiber in Territorial Highway and Ham Road coming out of Cresswell and then up to Veneta for their backbone of their fiber, their privately owned fiber optic network. And there's been a lot of questions about, are they going to put a drop or some kind of future provision to head south on Territorial, maybe once we repair that landslide and take over ownership of it, which we talked about earlier, that the possibility of extending broadband south into Lorraine. Are we also talking with all these private providers that are starting to expand their system about where we might incentivize them to get to some of these rural communities, or at least provide future provision?
So that's the biggest question for us, and I also get questions almost daily from residents who see fiber being run in front of their home and then aren't given access to that. So the example you brought up, Charter is running what they call dark fiber, which is fiber reserved for a singular future purpose, in this case for 5G wireless in metro areas, and they don't let anybody tap into it. They might lease a few strands here or there, and that's a common concern that we hear. You know, we haven't had luck really getting them to open up those strands, whether to lease it to another internet service provider that's willing, say Emerald or Access Media, a smaller one. And a lot of it is because the labor entailed in running fiber underground is so expensive that they need large density of users to offset those costs and to make it profitable for them. Which is why we're starting to put fiber above ground, because that cost is about $5 a foot compared to $15 a foot when you underground it. And, you know, for Lorraine, we do have an internet service provider who's looking to run fiber there in the next year or two. But again, these are expensive projects, complicated projects with the amount of right-of-way issues involved. But we're starting to see those expansions, and I wish we had more luck with the bigger players like Charter and CenturyLink in terms of leveraging them to allow us to use those, but we haven't yet.
So I might just make myself a mental note to think about that as a possible united front issue, because the actual regulation of those larger providers is the federal government, and maybe that's something we can lobby, you know, our congressional delegation about, looking at the, you know, what they can do in the regulatory environment that maybe, you know, helps facilitate that access. Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would agree with that, and in particular right now, as we speak today. Those regulatory issues come right out of Chairman Greg Walden's committee. And so not only, so I don't think people realize, so his committee, about 75% of all legislation in the House starts in his committee. Whether it's healthcare, whether it's high tech, whether it's some of these regulatory issues dealing with some of the broadband issues, they start right in his committee. And so I think with putting that as far as United Front is concerned, I think would make a good idea. And even if it changed hands, he's still ranking member. So he's still in a very, very powerful position regardless. And so I think adding that on would make a lot of sense. And so that that whomever goes back, and I think, is it Jay, it'll be you this? Yeah. And with you have a little bit of a relationship with Greg, and I think it would make sense then to sit down and say, this is what's important to our county and what will be beneficial. So I would agree. I think that that's an important piece to add on United Front, with especially with key members of our delegation that are there in DC right now.
Thank you. Commissioner Farr.
Just a tiny little note. Not many people know this, but we have a cable commission in town. And Commissioner Lykin and I are on the cable commission. About once every 4 years or so, we have a meeting, and we have one this week. So I'm not sure exactly what the agenda is. We're authorizing the franchise agreements with the cable, but it all wraps into into the work that you're doing. So.
Okay, thank you.
So it goes beyond the hallways and the confines of this building. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I just want to stress, this is not only a statewide issue, it's a national issue in rural communities. And so we are talking to organizations across the country about this. And there are a lot of folks working on it, and there are a lot of resources being allocated for this. And so, we're very hopeful in the next years you'll see a lot of progress in these rural communities.
Excellent. Thank you.
And I was tongue-in-cheek about that. We do meet more often than that.
Every 4 years?
Thank you, Austin. And now I'll bring up Lana Holmes, our HR Director, to talk about employee engagement.
Good morning, Chair Bozovich, Commissioners. As Judy said, I'm here to talk about enhancing employee engagement and resilience as a key strategic initiative, and the activity area that I'll be focusing on is identify and implement opportunities for employee engagement. At this time, we have 5 projects that we are working on to fulfill this activity area, and I'm just going to give you some highlights on those. The first is to revamp and rebrand our new employee orientation, usually known as NEO. People come to NEO on their, right when they start working. It's to help orient them to the county, who we are, our policies, procedures, get them signed up for benefits. But what we're really wanting to do is to create an engaging and inspirational onboarding experience. It's a perfect time with this new strategic plan and the core behaviors that we've identified to really enhance this first connection into our organization. So we'll be looking at exploring both in-person types of experience, how we can use technology in different ways, such as videos, self-study, and a variety of other methods to build a best-in-class experience that will extend beyond day one at the county. Because we all know once you're here, there is also that arc of onboarding that happens beyond NEO, back in the departments, back in their division and program areas, and how we help them really navigate that successfully. And that had a lot of interest, and there's a lot to do there. So we have 16 employees on that team. We'll have 3 subcommittees from folks from all over the organization and all levels in the organization participating in that. And we're really excited to see the changes that will come out of that project. The next is a mentorship program. We've heard a lot the last several months in the organization from a variety of individuals that are interested in having some type of mentorship available to them. So we'll be exploring both formal and informal types of programs, how we can create something to benefit our employees and the organization as a whole. There has been some foundational research already done, and we'll be bringing that into that project team. And then we'll be researching comparator counties and other organizations. That team has 8 individuals assigned to do that work. And then the next area is training and development for frontline supervisors. We all know that supervisors are basically the #1 influencers of employee engagement. So they're a critical component in the success of the work being done in the county. So we want to make sure that we're providing the right training, the right tools, and resources for them to be successful in their work and in their supervision of employees. So basically, this group will try to build upon initial efforts and the brainstorming that we've already started to create new ways to provide those tools and resources to supervisors. And that team has 10 employees on it doing that work from across the organization. And then the next area is stay interviews, which also kind of builds on that concept of supervisors being that kind of core influencer on employee engagement. So stay interviews are a key component in building strong relationships between an employee and their supervisor. So we'll have a team that's going to build on some initial research that our group has done, and we'll look at implementing and recommending and implementing some type of program that is meaningful for supervisors and the employees that they supervise, as well as manageable for an organization of our size. So we're really excited to see what comes out of that group, and there's 11 employees working on that team. And then the last group is really looking at career development. That's another area that topically we've heard a lot from employees across the county, having an interest in understanding more what their options are, what can they be doing to better set themselves up for further advancement in the organization. People have a lot of passion that come to work here. We have great talent. We want to keep that talent. And as people are talented, they also have aspirations, whether it's to move up or to move in laterally into different areas. And so this team will be looking at exploring tools and resources as well as ways to approach career development in other than the typical, more traditional avenues. So we're really excited to see what comes out of that team, and there are 11 employees that are working on the career development team. So we were really fortunate. We kind of sent out a request to all of the departments and said, you know, we need folks that are interested in these topical areas so that we can have cross-department representation, and we need all levels of employees. So the makeup on these teams do come from across the organization. We made sure to have folks that are line staff, that are supervisors and managers, and HR employees as well. And then we've had a really great Emerging Leaders program that you've all heard discussion about, and we were able to ensure that every one of these teams also had an emerging leader involved as well, which is a great opportunity for them and a great opportunity for us to learn more from them. So those are the areas that we're focusing on at this time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Commissioner Farr.
Wow, this is really exciting. I love the HR part of our work because really the people who are here in the organization are the organization. I have a quote. This is an old quote from many, many years ago that I recited many, many times. I know it right off the top of my head. It's and this is based on your frontline leadership, knowing that the people who are affected by the frontline leaders go upstream and downstream from that leader, that we're only capable to the extent that those leaders are capable. So to the teammate or customer that you come into contact with, you will be the county. It stands to reason that Lane County will be viewed as a capable, competent, and approachable organization only to the extent that they discover these characteristics in you. And that's what you're working on with frontline leadership, is developing those characteristics of capable, competent, friendly, outgoing, approachable, transparent, all of the things that we want to be as a county comes right through the people that you're talking about the training programs for. So thank you. It just does my heart good to hear you talking, Alana. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you on that, and I've just, maybe you can answer this offline, but I'm just kind of curious with the mentorship, whether there's any issues that come up under our collective bargaining agreements on that. If there's a mentor that, if we're asking somebody that's part of a bargaining unit to do mentoring, if there's issues that get involved, I'm just kind of curious if there's barriers that we need to start thinking about as we get into our contracts and all in the future.
I think that's a great question. I think what we'll be doing is going through our research and really trying to figure out what's going to hit a lot of the interests, and then certainly some of our lenses that we always try to look through are, what are our policies are in place? Do we need to create new policies? If there's anything related to any collective bargaining agreement, what would those issues be, and address them if necessary at that time? And I'll be happy to follow up with you on that.
Great. Yeah, this is really exciting because, having been involved in managing employees and all that and other organizations, employee engagement is such a critical issue. We're going to be getting our recruitment and retention audit here soon. And, one of the ways you retain employees and recruit them is having really high employee engagement. It allows people to stay. Those people are enthusiastic. They draw other people in. Half the way you get your best employees. In fact, I was noting, I think it was in your staff email to all about asking employees to pay attention to job openings and refer people to work here at the county because of the high amount of retention from internally referred applicants and the success rate of internally referred applicants and then the retention rate. So it's so important, and we are essentially a service organization. Almost everything we do is about service to our community. If you don't have engaged people, they're not providing good service. And that's really, that's why it's such a critical, piece when we talk about the what we want to see modeled here, as far as behaviors. All of that, what we're want modeled is all what you would see an engaged employee model, that driven to serve. If you're not engaged in your job, you're not driven to serve. those, focused on solutions, all those things. So this is such a critical piece of our strategic plan because so much else in our strategic plan hinges on engaged and active employees carrying them out. So it seems kind of like, we put you down at last and all that stuff. Not too many people are commenting and all that, but really this is huge when it comes to, how we execute everything else about our strategic plan. And I have to say, one of the reasons why, as we heard during announcements, we've got other, people from across the country want to come visit Lane County is the results we've gotten from being so strategic plan driven and the way we've managed to the strategic plan. I go back to our first version with Stan Biles. We did check off just about everything we put on that strategic plan as far as goals. We met all the goals, but we weren't quite as skilled in managing to the strategic plan at that time. And that's developed over the years, much to our county administrator's efforts, but also to the people he's put in place and driven that style of management. And because of that, we're getting noticed nationally. But this one little piece of our strategic plan is so critical to maintaining that and keeping that going. So I just don't want to downplay that.
I need to give you a few examples because I get really excited when you to support what you're saying, Commissioner, which is absolutely right. And last week I was at the ICMA conference, as I mentioned, and one of the speakers there was Greg Bell, who is a former U of O Duck basketball player who lives in Portland and wrote a book called Water That Bamboo, right? So you've heard this about, so he was one of the keynote speakers and he did a great job. He showed the clip of Chip Kelly after they had to go to the Rose Bowl. I forget who, they'd beaten the Beavers, right, to go to the Rose Bowl. I forget what year it was. And in the press conference, Chip Kelly talks about and how he was using this but the idea of Water the Bamboo is you plant a giant timber bamboo seed and you water it in the first year, nothing happens. You water it in the second year, nothing happens. Third year, still nothing. After the fourth year of watering the bamboo seed, it grows 90 feet, an average of 90 feet in 60 days. And the idea there is in the first 4 years before you see anything grow, it's growing roots. And it's not until the fourth year that it comes out of the ground and you start to see the results of all of that watering. And so that analogy, as he's talking, I'm just going, this is what we've been doing in this organization is laying foundations and growing roots, and we're starting to see the impact. So 2 examples, in the 2 of the last meetings of the CHC all-staff meeting that I attended around the strategic plan, and then the emerging leaders, graduates of the emerging leaders, the 40 graduates, 2 weeks ago. It was so much fun to see people go around the room and introduce themselves and tell their position, and so many in both these meetings, they said, well, I used to be in this position, but now I'm in this position. The person next to them said, well, I used to be in this position, but now I'm in that person's position. I moved from county or from HR over to H&HS, and the H&HS person moved from H&HS over to county administration in the budget office. We had someone, so there's all of this cross-pollinating promotion, people seeking opportunity within the organization. And we're creating these networks and opportunity for people to connect, to seek opportunities, to grow. There are conversations that are happening across the organization that are just fun. I received an email from an employee after the Emerging Leaders Program who said, I'm so excited about the strategic plan. This is someone who's not a supervisor, right? They're in a field role, a direct contributor role. But they went through the Emerging Leaders Program and they said, I'm so excited about the strategic plan. I'm so excited about our behaviors and our purpose. And I want everyone else to be as excited as me. But I'm finding that, it's not all there yet. And I said, that's okay. You're watering the bamboo. We're planting seeds. We're watering those seeds. And it takes time for the fruits of that labor to really come to fruition. So I just wanted to give you a couple examples and share in that excitement about absolutely things are not perfect absolutely, we have a long way to go, and there are issues that have to be addressed and more things we have to invest in and opportunities we have to create. But it's really exciting to see this work that's happening, because it really is some of the most important work, this workforce cultural leadership. We're creating a culture of leadership in the organization. It takes time to do that, but it's some of the most valuable things that we can do to impact everything else that we do in the organization. So you're going to hear more about these things, and I share in the board's excitement and enthusiasm about it, and it's really great work.
Steve, December 3rd, 2009, 7:10 kickoff, 27 degrees at kickoff, Ducks 37-33.
There you go.
Winner goes to Rose Bowl.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. I just want to remind the board, I'm going to have to take off at 5 minutes to 12.
Okay.
So, excellent, Ms. Holmes, excellent presentation. I'm so glad things are working out. We're not only watering the bamboo, but now we have like so much bamboo, we might have to tear some of it out. I don't know. The bamboo analogy. I wanted to mention one other thing, and that is employees obviously, are directed by their supervisors, and that is crucial, as we have discussed, and I'm all in favor of the efforts that are being made. But I also think employees are guided by an organizational culture, and in particular, their coworkers, people that are not necessarily their supervisors, but people they're working with or people they encounter in work. And you typically do not ask your supervisor, hey, where's the bathroom? Hey, where are the forms I need to fill out? You don't want to ask your boss those questions. You want to ask somebody else those questions. So it won't be as embarrassing, or you might ask questions that you wouldn't ask your boss. So my pitch is, my hope is that we're grooming the entire workforce to be as responsive as possible and helpful, not only with the public, which is crucial, but with each other. Because if you have a welcoming environment for employees and the other employees, not their supervisors, but people that work in other departments or people that work with them or people that are in jobs sort of equal to their job in sort of a military rank sort of sense, you're more likely to have a very positive work environment. And I think that we're headed in that right direction. But I just, all of if all the attention is on the hierarchy, the people above you in the hierarchy, then we're missing a component, which is the people you work with. And I know that the work we're doing on the strategic plan, the work we're doing with the strategic planners, the work we're doing with the university, the emerging leaders, workforce development, all excellent, all really toward the benefit of the taxpayer, of the people that pay the money to run this organization. And I really appreciate all the hard work you guys are doing. And I'll just add that one little bit that, people do learn from their coworkers, and they learn how to do things and how ethically to do things and how perhaps not so ethically to do things. And they learn the organization's culture primarily from their colleagues. Yeah.
Yes, Commissioner Sorensen, thank you for that. Absolutely, team dynamics for one of the areas you're discussing, who you work with, how well you work within your teams, as well as those you're in contact with from a customer service perspective, are very important. And I feel we're really fortunate to have Aaron Rollins here, who does some amazing work around training and development, from things like customer service training, communications, team building, team dynamics, as well as working with individual program areas or managers that know that they want to build their teams, and creating specific kinds of work that you'll do with them over a period of time. I feel like we're very fortunate right now, for all of the things we've discussed, to have a strategic plan that rolled out the core behaviors and our, what our purpose is. That is an area that brings all of us together, no matter where you work across the organization or at what level. And I feel like those really will help drive the dynamics, and as you mentioned, our workplace culture for every employee.
Commissioner Farr.
Very, very briefly, since this is HR, I have one compliment to level, and this is to you, Mr. Mokrahayski, but everybody else should bask in this. You know, I started working years ago for a little tiny hardware store called Jerry's. There were about 8 of us working there, and we became big, and we became world-class. One of my subtitles at Jerry's was Human Resource Director. And I've got to tell you, Mr. Mokrahayski, that the organization that you are building here, based upon some of the comments that Commissioner Sorensen made, pushing it right down to the level of the job being done, the excellence is being pushed right down to the level of the job being done. You are doing it as well as any world-class organization that I've been associated with. And I am proud to be a part of this organization, Mr. Mokrahayski.
Me too.
Any other questions on that? So just, I'm going to take a little side trip here. Can you go back a slide or two? You had some quotes up there.
This one?
Yeah. So that bottom quote, that quote down there, late in his career, Coach Lombardi ended up at the Washington Redskins, and some 12-year-old boy got to deliver his papers and shake his hand and meet him one day. And it'd be amazing, he'd probably be amazed that that 12-year-old boy is reading his quote right now.
Right on.
That is pretty cool.
So,
Nice.
things go round in circles, and I appreciate you bringing that quote forward from Coach Lombardi, because I did actually get to meet him in person when he was coaching the Washington Redskins. As I delivered his newspaper one evening, I was delivering what the now defunct Evening Star in Washington, D.C. area, when they used to have evening papers and morning papers.
We had that here.
Yeah.
So, thanks for that quote. Anything else on the strategic plan?
Good ingredients stay in the soup,
Yep.
Commissioner.
Yep.
Okay, I just had a couple quick comments and we'll try and wrap it up. We'll continue this format, I think just the quarterly meetings and also having an annual work session that we also can sit down and see if we needed to adjust anything or add any items. But I will kind of close with that and turn it over to you if there's any other comments or questions. And I would hope to hear if this format works for you. I think I could sit here all day and keep calling people and hearing from them in terms of what we're doing and we're working on. So I think it's fascinating to hear that piece. So hopefully that works for you. And I'll continue to reach out to you before we do these quarterly updates to see if there's anything in particular that you're hoping to hear back from. So with that, I will close and open it up for any questions or comments.
I can say the format worked really well for me today. Any?
It worked
It worked great. Thank you.
well for me.
Thanks.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Judy. Really appreciate the update. So with that, we'll move on to item 7A, which we delayed, which is Order 1810-0205 in the matter of authorizing a quitclaim deed and release of county-owned forest work camp real property and fixtures to Veterans Legacy, map number 1907-2500, tax lot 700 and 21500 on Siuslaw River, or at 21500 Siuslaw River Road, and in the amount of $1. And we have Betty Michaud here to present. Betty?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here this morning to bring you the item of authorizing a quitclaim deed and release of county-owned forest work camp real property and fixtures to Veterans Legacy. And this is per direction staff received on August 28th on a work session with the forest work camp, and direction to authorize that deed and fixtures to Veterans Legacy. So this is the final step in the long era of the forest work camp. I think that staff is pleased to see that Veterans Legacy probably will do a very good job with taking care of this property on behalf of the citizens of Lane County. I would like to mention that in talking with Dan Buchwald, he did share with me that some of the labor and volunteers that he's seeing at the work camp are actually former inmates at the work camp. So I think that says a lot about the program as it was and the program as it moves forward. So with that, I would like to really turn this over to the commissioners to see if they have any questions and final comments on the Forest Work Camp property.
Commissioners? All right. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you for waiting until I got here for this presentation, Ms.
Absolutely
Mashura.
no problem.
The rest of the presentation was great, so I hope you enjoyed that. You know, this is a culmination not only of the work of the camp itself, but it's also the beginning of a new era for serving veterans in our community. The Veterans Legacy, as we all know, there's nothing quite like it in the nation. And as they acquire the resources they need to put out for grants, to get resources from far and wide to move the program forward, this is the biggest step along the way, is their acquisition of the property. So thank you for your work, and you've been very, very patient. You've been diligent, and you've crossed every T, dotted every I, and made it happen. And when the board unanimously, or 4-0 with one absence, approved moving forward with this, it did my heart good that everybody spoke so highly of your work and of the work of Veterans Legacy.
Well, thank you, Commissioner.
With that, Mr. Chair, I can make a motion, and we can discuss to the motion if
Sure.
that's the will of the chair. Then I would move passage of Order 1810-0205, approving, authorizing a quitclaim deed and release of the county-owned Forest Work Camp real property and fixtures to Veterans Legacy. Map number 1907-2500-00700, 21500 Siuslaw River Road, Veneta, Oregon, 97487, for the amount of $1.
Second.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Farr, seconded by Commissioner Lykin to approve Order 1810-0205. Discussion to the motion. Commissioner Farr?
Can we frame the dollar?
I'm sure we could do that.
Then I have no further discussion to the motion. I think on November 8th, we'll have more of a ceremony, and I believe that's going to take place out at Veterans Legacy, and Commissioner Bozevich, Chair Bozevich, will be the keynote speaker at that event. Very excited about that.
Any other discussion to the motion? It's a great thing. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously 5-0. Thank you, Betty.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you for your patience. So that wraps up everything, although Commissioner Farr, you did miss announcements and agenda team requests. Was there any announcements or agenda team requests that you had for the board?
Bear with me just 1 second. I will announce that nothing to take people's time up with, other than, Ms. Mokarasi, I will say that your strategic plan was an item of extreme interest at the meeting that I was at this morning. It wasn't about strategic planning, but to me, everything revolves around the strategic plan. So most of the presentations I make do come back to the work that we're doing inside the plan. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Great. So with that, we'll move to review of assignments.
I just had the one from Commissioner Bozevich that received head nods to have land management look at how we permit campgrounds and for a potential future code amendment.
Great. That's one I have. Thank you. So with that, if there's no other business, I am going to read us into executive session, which I forgot to print out. So bear with me a minute here as I get the correct language. And we are going to recess into executive session, and our executive session items do not require us to come back out into public session to make any decisions. So I'm going to adjourn the board meeting from executive sessions. So after I finish reading us into executive session, we will recess and reconvene in the Board of Commissioners conference room, and then we're going to be adjourning from there. So the Board of Commissioners will meet in executive session to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed, and to review and evaluate the employment-related performance of the chief executive officer or any public body, a public officer, employee, or staff member who does not request an open hearing. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192-6602H and I, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decisions will be made in executive session, and we will be adjourning from executive session, so we are now recessed.